Now I want to introduce three people that I really owe a great deal of thanks to. Jim Cleveland, who with his wife Anna, Jim and Anna run Frenchman River Models, and they were kind enough to donate the kits so that Tom Farrell and Tom Yorke can build the new model that they're coming out with in O scale, called the Spillane Building. And it's a beautiful kit. It's a beautiful model. And both Tom Farrell and Tom Yorke are going to be building it for us shortly. But I wanted Jim to come on so that we could say thank you so much for the kits for these two modelers so that they can build them for us, Jim. But most of all, thank you so much for producing the designs that Tom Yorke is continuing to make for us. I think you're doing the hobby a real service, and I wanted to personally thank you for all your help to Tom in continuing to get his kits out in the market. So thanks again for all the help for the show, but thanks again so much for helping Tom continue to have his kits produced.
Well, it's a pleasure to produce his kits. They are amazing.
What's the next one after the Spillane Building?
You'd have to ask Tom what he's gonna finish up next. I'm not real sure which one it's gonna be. There's actually a bunch of really good ones on the on the horizon.
I just want to say
that's great to hear.
Well, thank you, James, for offering that kit to me. And Tom Yorke, I consider a celebrity within our hobby, and I'll go into that in my presentation, but it's like working with one of the pioneers in the hobby, and I'm just honored. Thank you.
Yep. You are welcome.
Well, I think it's going to be a great kit to see built. And again, Jim, thank you so much for all your help for the show and for providing the kits to these two great modelers. And best of luck with in the future. And we'll look forward to more Tom Yorke's kits.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, let me turn this over to Tom Yorke. I'm sorry, Tom Farrell. And then we'll start this segment.
Well, I hold on a minute here. Everybody see that? I'm doing this live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. So this is a new kit designed by Tom Yorke, who I just consider a legend in our hobby. He doesn't produce kits; he produces artwork, in my opinion. And I have some of his older, his original kits unbuilt on my shelf. I have a little collection of them, and I've only built a couple of them. This kit was just given to me recently, Monday, and I did make some progress on it, and I'll show you that this evening, provided I can. So this is called the Spillane Build. Oops, sorry. This is called the Spillane Building. We're going to do a build along here. I estimate this taking perhaps 3 or 4 parts. I have built Frenchman River model boats before, and they are highly detailed. This kit is highly detailed and somewhat complex. As you'll see, the kit is very comprehensive. It has resin parts, 3D printed parts, wood parts, just all kinds of components. It's a regular kaleidoscope of components. I wanted to say a little bit about Thomas Yorke, because maybe everybody doesn't really know the man. He got a degree in commercial art, University of Florida. But he worked as a Disney Imagineer. We're talking about a fellow that was the art director for Disneyland Paris, Main Street. And he was also the art director for Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom in Asia. That's a pretty powerful resume unto itself in the art world or in the commercial art business. And as far as his modeling career, which he obviously did on the side while he was a Disney Imagineer, he started way back in 1974, and his first kits were Hydrocal. Those are the kits that I have, are the Hydrocal ones, the older ones. He's made over 100 different kits, and they're all signed and numbered. And many of his kits command just hundreds of dollars, the original kits. And we are all fortunate that Jim and Anna Cleveland from Frenchman River picked up Tom Yorke's line, and they make them out of resin casting, so they're readily available on a widespread basis. And I urge you to take a look at the Frenchman River website. Not only do they have nearly all of Tom Yorke's previous kits, but they also have a variety of other detail parts and, of course, the boats. So thank you again, Jim and Anna, for the donation and supporting New Tracks Modeling. This new kit is brand new. It's never been produced. And like I said, it's very comprehensive. It has 60 resin pieces, 3D parts, decals, signs, all kinds of detail parts. And in Tom Yorke's own words, perhaps the most complicated design I've ever attempted in my career. That being said, we'll start part one of assembling this kit. The first thing, it came in a double box. There was a protective box out around this box. This box is quite large. This is a large kit. The box alone is 15 by 11 by 4. And when you open up the box, everything is neatly wrapped in foam. You can see the 3D printed parts up here. These are the decals. These are some of the resin components. There's a lot in this kit. One of the axioms from that I picked up off of the Frenchman River website is quick assembly, great results. Well, that may be true with some of the simpler kits. This one is pretty comprehensive. It'll take some time to do this one justice. So in general, resin kits are relatively easy to put together. The art is in the finishing and the painting of them. So the first thing I did is I unwrapped all the resin components. And with all resin components, they're castings, and they typically have mold release on them. So with a Dawn dishwashing detergent and in a water bath and a toothbrush, I just thoroughly cleaned everything and then dried it, and then I photographed it here. I just wanted to see what we were dealing with. Then I did a mock-up of the sidewalks and the base. There's two bases, the main building and then this extension. I did this mock-up because as I pontificate on all my scratch builds, I build my models on a plywood base. And that's in the event that I ever do take down the layout. The buildings come right out, and they're saved and not damaged. And in this case, it's particularly useful to have a base because otherwise these are the sidewalk, and I don't know how you'd build this without a base. It'd get a little tricky. So I cut a piece of plywood on my table saw, 7.25 inches wide, 12 inches long, and I used 1/2 inch thick plywood here. And I put a 1/2 inch perimeter around the plywood, and the model fits within this perimeter. And then I painted the perimeter black and the inside gray. There's no real reason to do that other than it photographs well when you do programs like this, to be honest. And then I began working the sidewalk. Now, because they are resin castings, the perimeter typically is a little high. So I just take a fingernail file and knock down that there's an edge around the perimeter. So I take that edge flat. So it glues better that way. So you're not resting on the rise that goes around the perimeter, the 180 degrees of each piece. Then using this Tamiya surface primer, I primed the sidewalk components. Now I like to use this surface primer because it's very light in so much as if you used an automotive primer, it's typically a filler primer or a thick paint. This is a very light paint. So there's a lot of detail cast in this resin sidewalk, you know, all these cracks and imperfections and things. And you certainly wouldn't want to use a filler primer. You want to use a surface primer like this. So it's worth the nominal expense. They point out that in resin kits, you can use epoxy. I've always used super glue to glue them together. I use this extra thick principally, and there's this very thin. Sometimes I'll start with the thick. Once it's set in place, I'll put a thin over the whole model, and then I'll hit it with a zip kicker, which my friend Dan Rousseau likens to welding, electro welding. It just locks up the super glue instantly. Makes for fast modeling and gluing fingers to parts sometimes. So the first thing I did was glue that sidewalk to the base. I will point out that I haven't referenced, I don't use directions. So this is just how Tom Farrell does it. I'm working exclusively off the photographs. We'll see if I need the directions. Always my little game not to use them. Don't do as I say. All right. Don't do as I do or how I say. Use the directions. I'm not going to use them. I did notice that these pieces were cast slightly irregular. The back of it here was thinner than the front. Then I thought that would be a cool idea to reverse it because you'd want the water to theoretically run from one end of the building to the other. But then there's a location here that wouldn't make sense. So I had a problem here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I thought that was too much of a gap, a height difference between the two right there. So I put these little spacers in here so that when I lay this sidewalk down, it's now relatively flush. So I just super glued these to the plywood. And then this corner piece, I put just a piece of scrap wood there. And so I got all these relatively flush to one another. And here's the sidewalk and the first building base, the main building base, which is resin super glued to the plywood. I do want to point out the quality of the resin castings on this kit. They are absolutely flat. They are not warped. There is not any really flash on them. They are virtually perfect. And I checked them with my modeler square. They're perfectly square as well. So a lot of time went into the execution and production of these resin components. That isn't always the case with resin kits. Sometimes they're more like a craftsman kit, if you will, because they're not flat, and they're not parallel, they're not perpendicular. These are watch-like in quality. And then they have just very high detail all through that sidewalk is just amazing. Next up, I took the main components of the first building, and I used my surface primer. I'm a big fan of Monster Works laser cut brick. I finally found something that exceeds the quality of Monster Works brick. This brickwork on here, I've been modeling for 50 years. This is probably the nicest brick I've ever seen. And you'll see just how well it turns out. I use this American Accents rust. This is that enamel, and this is an acrylic. It's a two-stage process. I've used this in the past. Anybody that's seen any of my shows, for example, design preservation models, I use this this material. I understand, I think from Bob Geldorf or a couple guys, you can't find this anymore, but since I still have it, I'm using it. So the first thing I did is after my primer dried, I sprayed the enamel onto the brick. I sprayed it in 4 different directions: north, south, east, and west, because I didn't want any primer to show. I let that dry overnight just to be safe. Then I went back with this acrylic medium, and you just paint it on, and I wiped it off with a paper towel. I won't be wiping the next building off with a paper towel because I got little pieces of paper everywhere. I'll use a cloth on the next section. Little note to myself. But basically you just paint this on thick and then wipe it off, and you get a really effective looking brick. As you'll see later, I'll put mortar in there and weather it and do things, but these are my base colors. So we've got primer on there, we've got the rust color, and now we've got the acrylic weathering medium on there. I use dull coat in a lot of my in between a lot of steps of my modeling, because if you don't use dull coat, sometimes the next layer of paint you put on there will dissolve the previous layer, and you get what we artists call a muddying of your colors. So the trick is to use dull coat, for example, and then that's a lacquer. So long as you don't use an oil-based paint over top of that lacquer, use a water-based paint, you won't get any cross mixing of these, basically these 3 layers now: the primer, the rust orange enamel, and then the acrylic wash. So it's sealed. Then I use this Roberts brick mortar, which is still available, and I basically just paint it on, and then I rub it off as well, you know, off the top surface of the bricks. It works very well. You can use other materials. You could even use a acrylic wash. I kind of like this stuff, so I use it. Next up, I can't leave those bricks as they are. These are some of the colors I used on the first floor. So I'll show you. I go back with the bricks, and I added this alcohol wash. This isn't really from Micromark gray brown. This is something I mixed myself. Now I just use the bottle, but it's just a black India ink and a isopropyl alcohol in there. This is another Vallejo wash, a rust wash. Rust makes a great color for brick. Same with this Vallejo light rust, and this surface primer, it's just a red brown. As you'll see, I'll go back with a flat artist brush, and I'll add a little bit of randomness to that brickwork, so we don't have one single color across the whole brick. And these colors are used for the stonework and the windows and trim. And this is just a weathering medium. That's not exactly a great photo, but you can see where I used that alcohol wash in here. This does not have the paint on here. The first thing I did is add a little of the black alcohol wash on here. And I have began coloring the stonework. The stonework is with this, this is actually a concrete color. Next up, I put in the front stonework. This appears in the photo from Frenchman River Model Works, it looks as though they colored it a dark brown, which would indicate a sandstone. I wanted to make it a limestone because my layout is based in the half of my layout is based in the limestone belt of Indiana. And the fact that I, as most people know, was the CEO of the largest limestone company in the world, I thought it was appropriate that I made it limestone. So concrete is a perfectly good color for buff limestone, which is the premium limestone. And this surface could be considered what we call a rock face. So in the production of this stone, they cut with diamond saws, they cut these blocks out, and then with a hand chisel, they chisel the front on top, bottom, left, right, and middle with a just fat chisel. It's called a rock face. Then I went back and I used this driftwood to darken it a little bit. It's really more buff. The photograph is not really doing this justice. It's really more buff than gray. I'll take my word for that on that. And then next up, I thought I'd prepare these windows. I believe these are 3D printed. These pieces to the right are cast, resin cast. I think these are 3D printed. I believe these are 3D printed, and I believe this is 3D printed. So the only thing on here that's resin are these. I went all the way to Lowe's and bought a specific color here. I wanted this darker green, hunter green. It's a satin though, but I did learn a new technique. So I sprayed these with this satin spray paint. I do have an airbrush, but I just hate cleaning my airbrush, so I just use rattle cans. Once this dried overnight, I went back and hit it with dull coat, which not only flattened took the satin color away, but made it a flat. It simultaneously leveled the paint, so there was no orange peel. So it looks like it was airbrushed. I mean, one of the nice things about airbrushing is you can put very light coats on and you don't get an orange peel effect that you might get with a rattle can. I learned a technique here by hitting semi-gloss or satin finish rattle can parts with dull coat, turns flat, goes, and you get a really nice surface. And here up started gluing up the sides, and you can see, it's tough to see in the photograph, but there's some variation in color here. There's the weathering from the alcohol wash. There's 2 or 3 brick colors here that I hit with a flat artist brush. I just tapped it just to get some variation across this. I didn't want it to look like every brick looked the same. And there's the nice, we always say in the limestone industry that limestone is the perfect complement to brick. It's a nice look. This buff, in fact, there's the nice buff color. Buff and the red brick look very nice together. You can see a little variation in here. There's variation in the mortar. There's the green color for the trim. There's the 2 pieces. There's the side. Look at the detail they put on this brick. I mean, isn't that amazing? I mean, the randomness and the fact that it isn't laser cut, everything is not parallel and perpendicular, adds to the realism of this. That's why I say of all my years of modeling, that's pretty spectacular work right there. I'm certain it's hand carved. And this is my limestone work. There's the back wall. Again, you can see the slight everything is a question of subtleties, just slight variation in color, slight variation in weathering. You don't want everything to look uniform. Just like the bricks aren't uniform, the finishing is not uniform. It has to have variation, and you get this very realistic look. It's a very impressive model. And there's the back wall, or side wall, excuse me. I mean, that is a very good looking kit. Very well done. And that's all we got for today. I am on my way to the Al Judy show tomorrow, and I'll get to work a little bit on this Monday and Tuesday again. So that's why I say it'll take probably four parts to go through this because I'm on the road. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much, Tom. So now
Great
let's
job,
turn to the let's turn to the designer of this kit, Tom Yorke. Tom, welcome. I really appreciate you coming here and showing us your build of this kit since you designed it.
Ooh, okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Jim and Anna Cleveland for continuing my line. As some of you know, I've had some medical conditions, and I can't really work in the shop casting resin and plaster much anymore. I can just do the pattern work. So this is a real boon. So thank you for your great work. Okay, my building. Do you have the photographs? Let's see. Okay.
Yep.
Some of the photographs are not going to be so great, but these are tower parts. And these are parts that I've modified. The part on the left is the spacer that goes between the windows. On one of the spacers, I removed the trim and I scored lumber in it. I cut a notch and put a little 2x4 there. And the window, I cut the bottom light out. That's just some of the little detail changes that I've done. Okay, if you got another photograph. Okay, this is the hard part. The base of the tower is one big clunk of a casting. And what I wanted to do was to make the interior hollow. So I took my jeweler's saw and I cut the inside chunk out, which took about 15 minutes, but it only took one blade. And I also cut the front, a little front section off because I wanted to recess that panel. And I was going to put ironwork on it to represent the stamped metal trim that was put on these buildings. So this is just the basis. Okay, next photo. What do we have here? Okay, this required just very little modification. I removed some of the bottom frill work a little bit, and I just cut a notch and bent that little piece of trim on the top edge. So when it's all assembled, that'll look fine. Okay, next one. Okay, that's the roof. Okay, what I wanted to do on this roof was I wanted it to look old. And so there's a lot of shingles that were missing. So what I had to do was I had to carve out these shingles with a knife and a file. And those will be covered with metalwork later. Okay, next photo. Okay, this is where I am right now on the building. I wanted to get it finished, but I couldn't do it yet. The turret on here shows you where I removed the center section of the bottom piece, and I added lumber to it because this stamped metal is applied over a wooden framework, and it's just nailed to the framework. And so if you're going to remove the metal, you got to have the framework there. The upper part of the turret is where I removed a little bit of the material there. And the center section between the windows, I added 2 pieces of aluminum air conditioning tape. And I just applied it. I bent the tape in the corner, and the tape that's on the bottom part of the turret, I mean, that's also the aluminum air conditioning tape. It's self-stick. But what I did was I bent up the edges, and then I applied CA glue to the sticky part of the edge to seal that edge. And it also stiffens the very thin piece of aluminum. And if you give it several coats of CA, you're not going to damage it later when you're working on it. Now this building, the upper floor is not occupied. The bottom floor has been taken over by 2 industries. One of them is all electric appliance care. They took over the left side of the building. They didn't want the kitchen, but they did want the entryway. But they only wanted 1 door. So they plugged this other door with concrete block and they stuccoed it over. Now, when the bar came along, they wanted the kitchen, which is on the rear, but there was no way to get in. So they had to cut a hole and put a door in the front wall. This is how these old buildings get adulterated, which is unfortunate in some cases, but it adds to their character, I think. Let's try the next photo. Okay, this is the rear. This shows how I put a little chamfer on here, which I use spackling compound. And you can't really see it, but when tar paper goes onto the roof, it doesn't bend at a 90-degree angle up the wall. It bends at an angle, at a sloping angle. Otherwise, the tar paper would break. So you have to make that with spackling compound, and then I sand it just a little bit, and then when you put the roofing on, it disappears. Okay, next photo. Okay, we've had a fire up there, and it's not finished yet, but they've plugged these 2 windows. There is a little, well, okay, I'll cover that later on the brickwork. I had a little problem with my wall here. I had to correct with spackle. Spackling compound, it's a wonderful tool. It corrects mistakes. Next. Okay, and here's the other part of the wall. The lower part of the all electric appliance, that part of the trim was apparently rotten, so that was taken out, and they just put concrete block on the bottom of the wall and put a vent in it, and then stuccoed it. The stucco is spackling compound. I just apply that with a palette knife and let it dry, and then very lightly sand it, and then score into it a little bit. The upper part of the turret shows the wall where I removed the trim around that wood panel, and then I scored wood in there because the metal's gone. Okay, next photo. Okay, that's another shot. Yeah, that shows you can see how the metal kind of is peeled away, is fallen off that one section. This is a part that I love to do. It's a really great detail. The little platforms on the wall are going to be for air conditioning units. Okay, we have another photograph. Are there any more? Let's see. Oh, that's a detail. Okay, that shows you. I actually scribed some wood into the casting on the panel between, and then you can see the metal work, how it looks torn. And I'll cover painting that later. This is aluminum air conditioning tape, and it's just applied. It's just patched over the holes in the roof, and it'll be painted later. Okay. These are the two basic sections of the turret. One thing I should tell people here is when you do the turret, you really should read the instructions. They were written for a purpose.
What do you mean?
That's the most difficult part of the kit. I mean, the whole kit is based on that turret. So that's the part that really needs to, you really need to take care, and you really should read the instructions. Okay, the next photograph. Okay, these are, okay, this shows how I cut the wall section. I put a piece of plastic in the upper wall, and then coated it with spackling compound, and then treated it, and then stuck the little that's a little resin casting that I had on hand. I stuck in there, and then the other one had the door cut in, so I had to add all this stuff on here. And then the little the right wall is going to get a great big air conditioner, and the left one's going to get a little unit. Next, okay, this shows how the basic tower goes together. Now these the white castings are my own castings, and the gray parts are the kit parts. But this shows how I cut out cut out the center, and then I put wood on the lower part of the tower, and then painted that. Okay, next, and this shows the back. I had to cut this because the back is solid, so I had to cut an opening. I was originally going to detail the interior upstairs to make it look like just a junk room, but since it was not going to be occupied, I realized that there's no need for electric lights because they wouldn't be there. So it's not detailed. So, okay. Yeah, this shows the little wall section that I put in that wall, the entry door. Got rid of one door. And those are two bad photos, but they'll show you the window and the spacer between the two windows of the tower. Okay, now this was the fun part. The Mesker Iron Works was in St. Louis, along with many other ironwork industries, and they made two kinds of parts. They made cast iron, which is what these columns are, and they're put over a wooden framework. So I decided on the one column to remove the lower piece since that broke. And this is the wooden framework that's remaining. Now the top part of the cornice, this is the wooden part that this cornice metal is fastened to. So it makes it look like a really solid system, but it's not. It's very flimsy. And what I did was I cut a little section of the cornice and made these little wafers. And I made 3 of those wafers. And I made this extra section out of styrene. Some of that will be covered and some of it will be left open. It was a nightmare to do, but it'll be effective when it's done. Next photo. Ah, it's me. I'd like to show a few tools that I do use. This is roofing material. Whoops. It is a restaurant napkin. It's extremely nice material. It makes great roofing because it's thick enough, and it has a smooth texture, but it's got a little bit of a texture to it. And I use white glue. I spray it and then I use white glue to apply it. That's one tool. The other tool I use is artist's gesso. That I use for my brickwork. That's the mortar. Let's see. Air conditioning tape. It's aluminum tape which has a sticky back, and you peel it off and apply it, and it will bend. You can apply it over the casting and sort of work it into the casting before you take the back off, and then very carefully take the back off, and you've got the shape that's already there, and you can apply this to the metal, and then you can bend it up, and that's a good tool there. Brushes. My 2 brushes, these come from my first job at Walt Disney, which is in 1972. I found them in the trash. Somebody didn't clean them. I took them out of the trash. I cleaned them, and they're 40-something years old, and I'm still using them. These are bristle brushes. This I use basically for scenery, and this one I use for my brickwork. It's a stiff. It used to be long like this, but it's old. I use these. These are cheap brushes. These come from Hobby Lobby, and you can get there's about 6 or 7 for about $8 in a pack. They will last a while, and then they become weathering brushes, but they're cheap. And the last brush I use is a good sable. The last time I bought this is a 1/2 inch. I use this to brush paint my 1/4 inch scale vehicles. I use acrylic paint. And instead of using a little brush like this, where you have to dip it and you have to paint a little bit and dip it again, paint a little more, this brush you dip and you can paint, and you can continue painting and brush half the vehicle and get it nice and smooth. I used to use an airbrush, but like the other Tom, I hate cleaning it. So I've got a brand new airbrush, which I have never used because I don't like cleaning it. I think those are basically all the tools. The one other thing. This is a good tool. It's a Prismacolor marker. This is what I use to paint my bricks. Instead of using a tiny brush, wherever it is like this, to very carefully paint a little brick, this just paints a brick just beautifully. It doesn't overpaint, it just paints a brick perfectly. And I use about 6 or 7 colors, depending upon my mood, of reds, oranges, yellows,
Great tip.
to do the brickwork. But that's the basic start of the story, I guess. So if there are any questions, feel free, and I'll have a new background next time.
Well, folks, you have seen 2 brilliant modelers. I mean, really talented modelers building the same exact kit. Anybody have any questions for either one of the 2 Toms? Well, we'll look forward to seeing both of you next week, and we'll go from there and see how this is going to progress. So